The message came at midnight, Earth time. Every screen on the planet flickered. Every radio crackled. Every device connected to the galactic network displayed the same face. It was Supreme Commander Rolvax of the Varan Empire, and he was smiling with rows of sharp teeth. "People of Earth," the alien commander said in a deep voice, "your time as a free species has ended. The Varan Empire claims your world, your resources, and your labor. You have 30 days to surrender. If you refuse, we will take everything by force." The broadcast ended. Silence followed. In the command center of Earth's defense fleet, Admiral Tejo stood perfectly still. Officers around him shouted into communicators. Screens displayed panic from cities across the world. But the Admiral did not move. He simply watched the empty screen where Rolvax's face had been moments before. "Sir," a young officer said, her voice shaking, "our scouts report the Varan fleet is already moving. 400 warships. They will reach Earth space in 28 days. Tejo nodded slowly. "And how many ships do we have, Captain Hannah?" Captain Hannah looked down at her tablet. Her face was pale. 42 combat-ready vessels, sir. Another 12 in repair docks?" The numbers were terrible. Everyone in the room knew it. The Voran Empire had spent 50 years building the largest military fleet in the galaxy. Their ships were massive, heavily armored, and equipped with weapons that could crack a planet's surface. Earth's fleet was small and designed mostly for defense and patrol work. "We cannot win this fight," one general said from across the room. "The math is simple. 10 to 1 odds. We should consider their terms." "Surrender," another officer asked. "You know what the Vorans do to conquered species? They turn them into slaves. Generations of slavery." Arguments broke out. Voices rose. Fear spread through the room like poison. Admiral Tejo raised one hand. The room went quiet. "I need to make a call," he said calmly. "Everyone continue your duties. Prepare the fleet for deployment. We are not surrendering today." He walked out of the command center and into a private communication room. The door sealed behind him. He sat down at a terminal and entered a code that very few people in the galaxy knew existed. The screen flickered. A woman's face appeared. She had gray hair tied back neatly and eyes that held decades of secrets. This was Dr. Yuna, chief engineer of the Interstellar Construction Guild. "I expected your call," she said. "I watched the broadcast, then you know why I'm calling." Dr. Yuna nodded. "The Varan fleet. You want to know about the ships? Want to confirm what I already suspect?" Tejo said. "The Titan-class battle cruisers. The Voidhammer destroyers. The Stellar Fang carriers. Are they still using them?" "They are. Their entire military backbone consists of those 3 ship classes. They have added some smaller vessels over the years, built in their own shipyards. But the main fleet? The 400 warships they are so proud of." Dr. Yuna smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "They are exactly the same ships." Tejo closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was something new in his expression. It was not hope exactly. It was certainty. "The protocols," he said. "Are they still active?" "We built those ships to last 300 years, Admiral. The protocols are woven into their foundation code. They cannot be removed without rebuilding the ships from scratch. And the Vorans never rebuilt them. Why would they? The ships work perfectly. Until they don't." Dr. Yuna leaned closer to the screen. "Until we decide they don't." The 2 old friends looked at each other through the screen. They had known this day might come. For 50 years, humanity had kept a secret so large that it would reshape the galaxy if it ever came to light. Now it seemed the time for secrets was ending. "I will need to brief the council," Tejo said. "They deserve to know the truth before we act. I will prepare the vault. Contact Daesung. We will need him. Daesung is 93 years old, and his mind is still sharper than anyone I know. He designed those ships, Tejo. Every wire, every system, every hidden pathway. If anyone can guide us through this, it is him." Tejo agreed. He ended the call and sat alone in the dark room for a long moment. Outside, he knew the world was falling into panic. News channels were predicting doom. Citizens were demanding answers. Governments were arguing about what to do next. But Tejo felt calm, because he knew something that Supreme Commander Rolvax did not. Something that the entire Varan Empire had never bothered to learn. They had never asked who built their mighty Warfleet. For 3 decades, human engineers had worked in secret shipyards throughout the galaxy. They had worn the uniforms of subcontractors, hidden their identities, and taken orders from alien overseers who treated them like servants. The Vorans had wanted the best ships in the galaxy, and they had hired the best builders without caring where those builders came from. They had hired humans, and humans always planned for the future. Tejo stood and walked back toward the command center. The doors opened, and the noise of a room full of frightened people washed over him. He walked to the main platform and looked out at his officers. "Listen carefully," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried. "The Varan Empire believes we are weak. They believe this war is already won. They have made a terrible mistake, and in 28 days, they will understand just how terrible." Captain Hannah looked up at him. "Sir, what do you mean?" Admiral Tejo looked at the screen, showing the approaching Varan fleet. 400 warships, each one a monster of metal and fire. "Those ships," he said quietly, "were built by human hands. And the Vorans never once wondered what that might mean." The room fell silent. Questions hung in the air, but Tejo said nothing more. There would be time for explanations later. For now, he simply watched the fleet approach, and he waited. The council chamber was deep underground, hidden beneath mountains where no scanner could reach. 12 men and women sat around a curved table, their faces lit by soft blue light. These were the leaders of Earth's government, military, and industry. They had been called here in secret, away from the cameras and the panic above. Admiral Tejo stood at the head of the table. Beside him was Dr. Yuna, and sitting in a wheelchair near the wall was an old man with thin white hair and gentle eyes. His name was Daesong, and 50 years ago, he had been the greatest ship engineer in human history. "What you are about to hear," Tejo began, "has been classified at the highest level for half a century. Only a small number of people know the full truth. After today, you will be among them." He pressed a button. A hologram appeared above the table, showing a massive warship. It was a Voran Titan-class battlecruiser, the pride of their empire. This ship, Tejo said, was built in the Nexus orbital shipyard in the year 2298. It was one of the first heavy warships, commissioned by the Voran military. They paid an enormous price for it. They believed they were buying from a company called Stellar Dynamics, a corporation based in the outer colonies. Right. He paused. Stellar Dynamics was a front company. It was owned and operated entirely by humans. Every engineer, every welder, every technician who touched that ship was human. The Vorans never knew. Murmurs went around the table. "How is that possible?" one council member asked. "The Vorans hate humans. They would never knowingly buy from us." Dr. Yuna stepped forward. "That is exactly why we hid ourselves. 50 years ago, humanity was small and weak. We had no military power, no political influence. Other species looked at us as nothing more than cheap labor. But we had one gift that no one else could match. We could build things. We could build them better than anyone." She brought up more images. Dozens of warships, stations, and transports filled the hologram. The Interstellar Construction Guild operated through hundreds of front companies across the galaxy. We built ships for the Vorines, the Keth Collective, the Myral Union, and a dozen other powers. We worked in their shipyards, wore their uniforms, and let them believe they were supervising ignorant workers. They never realized those workers were designing miracles. Old Daesung spoke for the first time. His voice was soft but clear. "I personally designed the Titan-class hull. Every system, every pathway, every hidden corner where code could sleep unnoticed, smiled gently. I also designed the Voidhammer destroyers and the Stellar Fang carriers. The Varan military's entire backbone came from my mind." Captain Hannah, who had been standing near the door, felt her breath catch. "You built the enemy's fleet?" We built everyone's fleet, Daesun replied. That was the point. If every major power owned ships we created, then no one would dare attack us. Because attacking us would mean turning against their own technology. But the Vorans are attacking us now, Hannah said. Double quotes. Yes. Daesung nodded slowly. Because they forgot. 50 years is a long time. The engineers who worked with us are dead. The records were buried. A new generation of Vorans grew up believing their ships were purely their own creation. They forgot where the metal came from. They forgot whose hands shaped it. An elderly woman at the table leaned forward. This was Mira, once Earth's greatest diplomat. She had retired long ago, but had been called back for this meeting. I brokered those original contracts, Myra said. I sat across from Varan officials and smiled while they insulted humanity. They called us primitive, useful only for simple labor. I agreed with them. I let them believe they were superior. And while they laughed at us, we built the very fleet they now threaten us with. The room was silent. The weight of 50 years of secret planning pressed down on everyone. So what do we do now? One general asked. Even if we built those ships, they belong to the Vorans. We cannot simply take them back. Taeho looked at Daesung. The old man nodded. When I designed those ships, Daesung said, I included something special. Something that has been sleeping in their systems since the day they launched. We called it the Sleeping Giant Protocol. The hologram changed. Lines of code appeared, flowing through a diagram of a ship's computer core. Every ship we built contains master authorization codes. These codes are buried so deep in the operating system that they cannot be removed. Without rebuilding the entire computer from scratch, the Vorans never found them. They never even looked. Why would they? The ships worked perfectly. What do these codes do? Hannah asked. Daesun turned to her. Whatever we want them to do. Shut down engines, disable weapons, lock navigation, turn off communications. I can make those 400 warships as harmless as floating rocks. The council erupted in voices. Some were excited, some were terrified. Some demanded proof. Tahoe raised his hand for silence. There is a facility, he said, hidden beneath the mountains of the Korean peninsula. We call it the Architect's Vault. It contains the master. Blueprints and control systems for every ship humanity ever built for foreign powers. Tomorrow, we will go there. And we will decide what to do next. Dr. Yuna added. We must be careful. Using the Sleeping Giant Protocol will reveal our secret to the entire galaxy. Every species that bought ships from us will know. Some may thank us. Others may fear us. Everything will change. And if we do nothing, Mira asked quietly, then Earth falls. Our people become slaves. And everything we built over the last 50 years means nothing. The room fell silent again. Admiral Taeho looked at each face around the table. He saw fear. He saw doubt. But he also saw something else. He saw determination. These were people who had grown up hearing stories about humanity's weakness. Now they were learning the truth. Humanity had never been weak. It had simply been patient. The Vorans will reach our space in 26 days, Taeho said. We have time to prepare. We have time to think. But make no mistake, we will not surrender. We will not bow. And when Supreme Commander Rolvax sees what human hands can do, he will understand the greatest lesson the galaxy has ever learned. He turned off the hologram. Never underestimate the builders. The meeting ended. The council members left in silence, their minds full of new knowledge and old secrets. Only Taeho, Dr. Yuna, and Daesung remained. Are you ready for this? Taeho asked the old engineer. Daesun looked at his wrinkled hands. Hands that had shaped steel and wire. Hands that had built empires without anyone knowing. I have been ready, he said, for 50 years. The elevator descended for 15 minutes. Admiral Taeho watched the depth counter climb higher and higher. 2 kilometers. 3, 4. They were traveling deeper than any normal facility should. Beside him stood Dr. Yuna, Captain Hannah, and old Daesung in his wheelchair. They had traveled in secret to this location, a mountain range in the southern part of the Korean peninsula. On the surface, there was nothing. Just rocks, trees, and a small maintenance building. But beneath the surface lay something that could change the fate of the galaxy. The elevator finally stopped. The doors opened, Captain Hannah gasped. Before them stretched an enormous underground chamber, carved from solid rock. The ceiling rose 50 meters above their heads. Blue lights hummed along the walls. And in the center of the chamber stood the most advanced computer system Hannah had ever seen. Towers of processing units stretched toward the ceiling like metal trees. Screens covered every surface, displaying ship designs, code streams, and star maps. A young man hurried toward them. He was small and thin, with messy black hair and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. This was June, the systems analyst who had maintained the vault for the past decade. Admiral June said breathlessly, "Everything is ready. We have full access to all archived systems." "How many ships?" Taeho asked as they walked toward the central platform. 4,723 vessels across 12 species. That includes the Varan fleet, the Keth Collective's patrol ships, and the Myral Union's transport carriers. June pushed his glasses up nervously. Basically, a large portion of the galaxy's military and commercial fleet passed through human shipyards at some point. An older woman emerged from behind one of the computer towers. She wore a military uniform with more medals than Hannah could count. This was General Sumin, the officer who had originally authorized the Sleeping Giant protocols decades ago. "Admiral Taho," the general said with a nod. "I always knew we would end up here someday. I just hoped it would not be in my lifetime." "War was always a possibility," Taeho replied. "That is why you created the protocols in the first place." "Yes." General Sumin walked toward the main control station. "When we started building ships for other species, I knew we were creating something dangerous. Warships are weapons. Weapons can be turned against their makers. So I asked myself a simple question. What if someday someone uses our own creations to attack us?" She touched a screen. A diagram appeared showing the internal systems of a Voran battlecruiser. The answer was elegant. We would not fight their ships. We would simply remind those ships who their true makers were. Daesong wheeled himself forward. His old eyes scanned the screens with sharp intelligence. "Show me the authorization interface," he said to June. June nodded and pulled up a new screen. It displayed a simple input field, waiting for credentials. "The Sleeping Giant protocol requires the original architect's authorization," June explained. "That means you, sir. Your credentials are hard-coded into the foundational systems. No one else can activate it." Daesong reached toward the keyboard with trembling fingers. He paused. "Before I do this," he said quietly, "I want everyone to understand what we are about to do. For 50 years, humanity has survived by being invisible. We built the galaxy's ships. We maintained their stations. We fixed their problems. And no one ever thought of us as a threat. The moment I enter this code, that changes forever." Dr. Yuna stepped closer. "We know the risks. Do you?" Daesong looked at each person in the room. "Every species that bought ships from us will learn the truth. Some will be grateful. Others will be terrified. They will wonder what else we have built, what other secrets we have hidden. Trust will shatter. Alliances will break. The galaxy will never see humanity the same way again." Captain Hannah spoke up. "But if we do nothing, there will be no humanity left to see." Daesung smiled sadly. "You are right, young captain. There is no good choice here. Only less bad ones." He turned back to the screen and entered his credentials. A string of characters from 50 years ago still burned into his memory. The system accepted them immediately. The chamber hummed. Screens flickered, and then a map of the galaxy appeared above them, showing thousands of tiny lights. Each light represented a ship that human hands had built. "Connection established," June announced. "We have access to all Sleeping Giant nodes across the Varan fleet." Admiral Taeho studied the map. He could see the Varan Armada, 400 lights moving slowly toward Earth's solar system. Each one of those lights was a warship capable of destroying cities, and each one was now connected to the vault. "What exactly can we do to them?" Hannah asked. Desong pulled up a list of options. We can disable their weapons systems. We can lock their navigation computers. We can shut down their engines. We can seal their internal doors. We can turn off their external communications. He paused. We can also maintain their life support. I am not interested in killing crews, only in stopping the war. General Sumain crossed her arms. So we disable the fleet, board the ships, and capture them. Simple in theory, simple if everything works, Dr. Yuna said. These protocols have never been tested at this scale. We designed them, but we never had to use them. There could be problems we did not predict. Then we prepare for problems, Tejo said. We train boarding teams. We position our ships for rapid response. And we give the Vorons one chance to retreat before we act. You want to warn them? Suman asked sharply. Want to give them a choice. If they continue forward, they do so knowing the consequences. That is only fair. They would not show us the same fairness. Then we will be better than them. Tejo's voice was firm. Humanity did not survive for centuries by becoming monsters. We will not start now. The room fell silent. Finally, Desong nodded. The Admiral is right. We have power now. Real power. How we use it will define who we are. He looked at his hands again, those old hands that had built so much. I spent my life creating things, ships, stations, dreams made of metal. I never wanted to destroy. Even now I hope for a future where we never have to use this weapon. That future depends on the Vorons, Hannah said quietly. Yes, Daesung sighed. It always depends on others. But we can only control ourselves. So let us be the kind of people our children can be proud of. Admiral Tejo placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. We will be. I promise. He turned to the others. We have work to do. 24 days until the Varan fleet arrives. Let us make sure we are ready. The team spread out through the vault, preparing systems, running tests, and planning for a battle that would be unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Above them, the world continued in fear and uncertainty. But deep underground, humanity prepared to remind the galaxy of a simple truth. Those who build the weapons choose when they fire. The Varan Armada entered Earth's solar system like a storm of metal and fire. 400 warships arranged in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under distant starlight. Leading them was the flagship Dominion, a massive vessel carrying Supreme Commander Rolvax himself. On the bridge of the Dominion, Admiral Keth watched the approaching blue planet with hungry eyes. Earth looked so small, so fragile. He could not understand why the humans had refused to surrender. Their tiny fleet was already visible on sensors, 42 ships forming a defensive line near the fourth planet. Pathetic, Keth muttered. They actually think they can fight us. A communications officer turned from his station. Admiral, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Let me hear it, the speakers crackled. A calm human voice filled the bridge. Varan Fleet, this is Admiral Tejo of Earth's Defense Force. You are approaching sovereign human space. We ask you one final time to turn back. Keth laughed. His officers laughed with him. You are operating vessels constructed by human engineers, the voice continued. If you proceed, you will face consequences you cannot imagine. This is your last warning. Withdraw now. The transmission ended. Keth shook his head in amusement. Human engineers? What nonsense is this? Our ships were built in the finest Varan shipyards. Perhaps it is a trick, one officer suggested. Psychological warfare. A poor trick. Ignore them. All ships advance to attack positions. We end this today. The Varan fleet surged forward. Weapons powered up. Targeting systems locked onto the small human ships. In minutes, the battle would begin. Thousands of kilometers away, Admiral Tejo stood on the bridge of his flagship, Soul's Light. Around him, officers worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. Only calm determination. The Devorans are advancing, Captain Hannah reported. They have ignored our warning. I expected as much. Tejo opened a secure channel to the Architect's vault, deep beneath Earth's surface. Dr. Yuna Daesung, Are you ready? In the underground chamber, Desong sat at the main control station, his fingers resting on the keyboard. Dr. Yunus stood beside him. June monitored system readouts nearby. Ready, Daesung said softly. On your command, Admiral, then let us begin. Daesong entered the activation sequence. Lines of ancient code raced through the galactic network, traveling faster than any missile, more powerful than any weapon. The code slipped into the Voran ships through pathways their crews never knew existed. It moved through systems like water through sand. And then, one by one, it woke the sleeping giants. On the Dominion, alarms suddenly screamed. Admiral Keth grabbed his command chair as the ship shuddered. What is happening? Navigation offline, an officer shouted. We are losing engine control. Weapon systems are shutting down. I cannot stop it. Communications are dead. We cannot contact the other ships. Keth watched in horror as his screens filled with error messages. All around the flagship, other ships began to drift. The perfect formation collapsed into chaos as 400 vessels lost control of their own systems. Engines went silent. Weapons powered down. Navigation computers displayed nothing but static. This is impossible, Keth whispered. Our systems are independent. How can they all fail at once? His chief engineer rushed onto the bridge, his face pale with terror. Admiral, I traced the shutdown commands. They are coming from the ship's foundational code. Code that was installed when the vessels were first built. That is 50 years old. Who wrote that code? The engineer swallowed hard. I do not know. The original construction records are classified. But the command signatures, the authorization protocols, they are not Voran. They never were. The truth hit Keth like a physical blow. The human's warning echoed in his mind. You are operating vessels constructed by human engineers. It was not a trick. It was not psychological warfare. It was the truth. Impossible, Keth breathed. We built these ships ourselves. No, Admiral, the engineer's voice cracked. We did not. Someone else built them. And that someone just turned them off. Across the void, the Voran fleet drifted helplessly. 400 warships, the pride of an empire, reduced to floating metal coffins. Life support remained active. Crews lived and breathed. But they could do nothing else. Admiral Tejo watched the sensor displays with grim satisfaction. Launch boarding teams. Human shuttles surged from the defensive fleet, racing toward the disabled Voran ships. They moved with precision, targeting flagships and command vessels first. Marines in combat armor breached airlocks and swept through silent corridors. Captain Atana led the team that boarded the Dominion. She moved through the great warship with her rifle ready, but she met little resistance. Voran soldiers stood confused in hallways, their weapons useless because the ship's armory systems had locked them out. Officers wandered in shock. Unable to understand what had happened to their mighty vessel, Hannah reached the bridge and pushed through the doors. Admiral Keth stood in the center, surrounded by his helpless crew. He turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never expected to see in a Voran warrior. Fear. Admiral Keth, Hannah said steadily. By order of Earth's Defense Force, you and your fleet are now prisoners of war. Your ships have been disabled. Your weapons are offline. Resistance is pointless. Keth's hands trembled. How? How did you do this? Hannah lowered her rifle slightly. Your empire hired human engineers to build this fleet 50 years ago. You paid them well. You supervised their work. But you never respected them enough to wonder what they might be building into your ships. That is not possible. We would have known. You only knew what we wanted you to know. Hannah gestured to her Marines. Secure the bridge. The Marines moved forward. Voran officers were restrained gently, but firmly. Keth did not resist, as his hands were bound. He seemed too stunned to fight. Back on the Soul's Light, Tejo received reports from across the fleet. Boarding operations were proceeding smoothly. Minimal casualties on both sides. The Vorans were surrendering in confusion, their will to fight shattered along with their understanding of reality. Dr. Yuna's voice came through the communicator. Admiral, Supreme Commander Rolvax is demanding to speak with you. He is transmitting from the surface. Tejo smiled thinly. Rolvax had stayed safe on his homeworld while sending others to fight. Of course he had. Put him through. The face of the Varan's Supreme Commander appeared on screen. His expression was twisted with rage and disbelief. "What have you done?" Rolvax screamed. "This is treachery. This is sabotage. You will pay for this crime." "There is no crime," Tejo replied calmly. "We built those ships. We simply reminded them of that fact. You will return our fleet. You will release our soldiers. Or we will make you suffer in ways you cannot imagine." "With what?" Tejo leaned forward. "What will you attack us with, Commander? The ships we built? The weapons we designed? The technology we gave you?" He shook his head. "You declared war on the people who created your military power. You threatened the builders. And now you have nothing." Rolvax's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "Here are our terms," Tejo continued. "Your fleet will be returned after full peace negotiations. Your soldiers will be treated humanely and released. In exchange, the Varan Empire will recognize Earth's sovereignty and pay reparations for this unprovoked aggression. You cannot dictate terms to us. We already have." Tejo ended the transmission. He turned to look out the viewport at the drifting Varan ships, now swarming with human shuttles. The greatest military fleet in the galaxy. Defeated without a single shot fired, Captain Hannah's voice came through the communicator. "Admiral, the Dominion is secured. Admiral Keth is in custody. Good work, Captain. Bring him home." Allowed himself a small smile. The war was over. It had lasted less than an hour. 3 months had passed since the day the Voran fleet fell silent. The galaxy had not stopped talking about it since news spread faster than light through the communication networks. The mighty Varan Empire, conquerors of star systems, had been defeated by a species they considered primitive. Their entire military fleet had been disabled in seconds, captured without a battle. And the truth behind that defeat had shaken every civilization in known space. Humanity had built the weapons of the galaxy, and no one had ever known. On the Varan homeworld, chaos reigned. Supreme Commander Rolvax was arrested by his own people, blamed for the greatest humiliation in their history. Citizens demanded answers. How had their leaders purchased an entire fleet from the very species they tried to conquer? How had no one noticed? The government collapsed within weeks, placed by a council that immediately sued for peace. Other species reacted differently. The Keth Collective quietly audited their own ships, searching for hidden code. They found it. The Myral Union discovered that 70% of their transport fleet contained similar protocols. Fear spread through diplomatic channels like wildfire. Earth received thousands of messages. Some were threats, some were demands for explanation, and some, surprisingly, were offers of alliance. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly wanted to be friends. They recognized power when they saw it, even power that had been hidden for decades. Ambassador Yunbai stood before the Galactic Council, representing Earth for the first time in history. The council chamber was enormous, filled with delegates from dozens of species. Most of them watched her with suspicion. A few watched with open fear. She was a small woman with short gray hair and calm eyes. She had been chosen for this role because she could speak truth without anger, deliver strength without aggression. She stepped up to the speaking platform and looked out at the assembled representatives. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council," she began. "I come to you not as a conqueror, not as a threat. I come as a representative of a species that has spent centuries being overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed." But she paused, letting her words settle. "Yes, we built your ships. We built your stations. We built the infrastructure of your civilizations while you looked down upon us. We did this because we had no other choice. We were small, we were weak, and we needed to survive." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. "Some of you are afraid now. You wonder what else we have built. What other secrets we have hidden. You imagine dark conspiracies and hidden weapons waiting to strike." Junbai shook her head. "Let me be clear. We do not seek empire. We do not want conquest. We only ever wanted one thing: to be left in peace. She gestured toward the great windows, where stars glittered in the endless black. The Varan Empire attacked us without cause. They threatened our people with slavery. We defended ourselves using the only weapon we had, the truth. The truth that we created the machines they called their own. The truth that those who build have power over what they build. Her voice hardened slightly. We could have done worse. We could have destroyed their fleet instead of disabling it. We could have killed their crews instead of capturing them. We chose mercy. We chose restraint. Remember that when you judge us. Keth Delegate rose. And what of the ships you built for us? For others? Are we all hostages to your hidden codes? Yunbai met his eyes steadily. You are asking if we can shut down your fleets as easily as we shut down the Vorons? The answer is yes. We can. Gasps filled the chamber. But we will not. Not unless you force us to. The sleeping giant protocols will remain dormant as long as peace is maintained. Attack us, and they wake. Leave us alone, and you have nothing to fear. The Keth delegate sat down slowly. No one else spoke. Eun-by softened her expression. We do not want enemies. We want partners. We want to trade, to share knowledge, to build together openly instead of in secret. The age of hiding is over. Humanity steps into the light as equals, and we hope you will meet us there. She bowed slightly and stepped back from the platform. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, one by one, delegates began to nod. Some in acceptance, some in resignation. But all of them understood that the galaxy had changed forever, far from the council chamber. On a quiet hillside overlooking the ocean, Admiral Teho sat beside old Daesun. The war was over. The treaties were signed. Earth was safe. Teho had resigned from active duty. Satisfied that his work was done, Daesung breathed in the salt air. His wheelchair rested on a flat stone, positioned to catch the afternoon sun. He looked more peaceful than Teho had ever seen him. They never asked, Daesun said softly. Teho glanced at him. Who? The Vorons. The Keth. All of them, the old engineer smiled. They hired us to build their greatest weapons. They watched us work. They took our ships and flew them across the galaxy. And not once in 50 years did any of them ask a simple question. What question? Daesun turned to look at Teho with those gentle, clever eyes. Who are these people building our ships? What do they want? What do they dream of? He shook his head slowly. They saw us as tools. Hands to hold welders. Eyes to read blueprints. Nothing more. They never wondered if tools might have plans of their own. Teho nodded. That was their first mistake. And their last. Daesung looked back at the ocean. I spent my life building things. Ships and stations. Dreams made of metal. I always hoped they would be used for good. For exploration. For connection, he sighed. Instead, they became weapons. Instruments of fear and conquest. They did not have to be, Teho said. You saved lives with those protocols. You gave us a weapon that does not kill. That is something to be proud of. Daesung was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled again. Perhaps you were right. Perhaps the best weapons are the ones that never need to fire. Back at the Interstellar Construction Guild headquarters, Dr. Eunice sat in her office, reviewing a stack of new contract requests. They had come flooding in since the truth came out. Species that had once hidden their dealings with humanity now approached openly, humbly, asking for help. A knock came at her door. She looked up to see Captain Hannah standing in the entrance. Dr. Yuna, you asked to see me? Yuna smiled and gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I wanted to thank you personally. Your boarding operation was flawless. Not a single life lost. Hannah sat down, looking uncomfortable with the praise. I was just doing my job. You were doing more than that. You showed mercy to an enemy that would have shown us none. That matters. Yuna leaned back in her chair. I also wanted to offer you a position. The Guild needs security advisors now that we are operating openly. People who understand both military strategy and human values. I think you would be perfect. Hannah considered the offer. I never thought about leaving the military. You would not be leaving it. You would be extending it, protecting what we build, making sure our creations serve peace instead of war. Una smiled. Think about it. Hannah nodded slowly. I will. In the months that followed, humanity took its place among the stars, not as servants, not as hidden builders, but as equals. The Interstellar Construction Guild expanded, taking contracts openly from civilizations that finally understood the value of respect. Ships bearing human designs now flew with pride instead of secrecy. The Varan Empire slowly rebuilt, humbled but not destroyed. They paid their reparations. They released all claims on Earth and deep in their archives. Historians began documenting the true story of their fleet, a warning for future generations about the dangers of arrogance. Ambassador Ambai remained on the Galactic Council for 20 years, guiding humanity through its new role in galactic politics. She was known for her fairness, her wisdom, and her gentle reminders that those who underestimate others often pay the highest price. And somewhere on Earth, in a small house by the sea, old Daesong lived out his final years in peace. He built small things now. Wooden toys for neighborhood children, model ships that sat on shelves, simple creations that brought simple joy. When he died, peacefully in his sleep at the age of 97, the entire galaxy paused to honor him. The man who had built empires in secret, the man who had saved his species without firing a shot, the man who proved that the quietest hands often hold the greatest power. His final words, written in a letter found beside his bed, became humanity's motto for generations to come. Build with wisdom, build with care, and never forget that the hands that create can also choose when to stop. The galaxy remembered.